Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
Welcome, my darlings. Please sit down and enjoy. But leave the comfy chair for Ermine Case and the love seat for Darren and Jennifer Daw, my Patreon supporters. More Skinwalker Stories from the Past by LyshaNinja. Hello, everyone. It's been a long time since I've posted. I've been super busy with work and haven't had much time to write. I thought it was about time that I sit down and tell another one of my Skinwalker stories. This is a story that was told by my uncle's wife. She lives outside of Gallup in a community called Bed Springs. I've told one of her stories in the past, so if you haven't read that story, you should go back and check it out. In fact, if you haven't read any of my other stories, I would greatly appreciate it if you took the time to read them. One evening, my aunt was home with her siblings. Her parents ran into town to do some errands and wouldn't be back until late. She lived in a pretty rural area, surrounded by a thick forest. Her house was pretty small, and they had a few horses. Their horse corral was quite a ways from their house. Each evening, the kids would be sent out to tend the horses by giving them hay and filling the water troughs. The hay bales were stacked near the barn. The bales of hay were large, each about 4 feet long, 2 feet high, and 3 feet wide. There was a stack of these large bales, maybe 30 of them. My aunt said that they didn't have a very large barn, so they would keep the hay outside and cover it up when it rained. As they were taking hay to the horses and filling the water troughs, my aunt heard a sound. It was a shuffling, scratching noise. The sound was amplified when all of the children stopped to listen. Where they lived, it was so quiet. They could hear the wind blowing the trees, but then it would be interrupted by the sound. My aunt's older brother walked around to pinpoint the sound. It was coming from behind the hay. There was a space between the hay and the barn, not very big at all. The kids all looked and saw something dark wedged between the bales of hay and the wall of the barn. When it moved, its body scraped against the hard surface of the barn. The kids wondered what it was. No one was sure. They figured that whatever it was harmless, and went to finish their work. It started to get darker, and the kids thought they would look to see if the thing was still there. It was still wedged against the wall, but this time it wasn't moving. Suddenly it began to cry out like a cat. Meowing began to come from behind the hay. It sounded strange. It was off. Whatever was behind the hay was too large to be any cat. My aunt said they got very scared because the more they listened to the noise the thing made, the more it sounded like a person trying to mimic a cat. The kids went inside the house and locked the door. By this time it was dark. The kids were sitting in the house, not talking very much. My aunt said that her brother told them to be quiet, and he kept peeking out the window towards the barn. Suddenly, loud noises were heard. Rapid pounding was coming from above, as if someone was running on the roof. My aunt said that it had to be a person, because the footsteps were so loud. She began crying and screaming as the footsteps ran back and forth. Whatever it was, ran back and forth on the roof for several minutes. None of the kids were brave enough to investigate. The footsteps finally stopped. It got very quiet, and the kids sat together, shaking with fear. Their attention was drawn back to the door. They heard noises coming from outside. They all huddled together, bracing themselves for the worst. The door opened, and dread was immediately substituted with relief as their parents walked through the door. My aunt and her siblings told her parents what had happened, and they thought that was the end of the horrifying encounter. However, as the days went on, her family would hear footsteps on the roof at night. Whoever it was would run back and forth, even when her parents were home. She said that her dad would open a window and yell at whoever it was in Navajo. He would tell it to leave his family alone, and then he would begin to pray. My aunt says that eventually the footsteps stopped, but that this was not the last encounter that she would have with the skinwalkers. Thank you again for reading. I thoroughly enjoy sitting with my family and hearing these old stories of their encounters. Thank you, Lisha. We certainly enjoy listening to them too. Out of This World Visitors by Raldo GTM. I used to visit the Navajo reservation a few times a month, taking food and water to my grandmother and helping her with chores around the house. Majority of the times I went out there, I used to go with my mother. My mom would occasionally visit my grandmother's neighborhood. She used to take her water and food, sometimes, or we would have to haul water for her livestock. One time we took her some food, she told us a strange story. She told us that she wasn't getting much sleep. My mother asked her why she was having problems sleeping, and she said that she was losing her mind. Now, she did not have any modern appliances or electricity and running water. She only had a battery-operated flashlight and an AM radio. She didn't come to town much and lived a secluded life. At the time she was old. I couldn't give you an estimate of her age, but she was old. She told us that one night she woke up and the room was bright, like the sun was up. She was confused because she was used to waking up before the sun and saying her prayers as the sun rose, and now she'd overslept. She'd heard some noises coming from the next room, and she got up to investigate the noise. As she walked towards the doorway, the light was gone. It was totally dark again, and she stumbled back to her bed. She was confused on just what happened. My mother and I didn't know what to tell her, and we assured her that we would stop by more often to check on her well-being. A week later, when we checked on her, she told us that the sun came back out a few nights ago. This time she sat up and looked towards the doorway, and that's when she'd seen little kids running across the doorway. She got up and yelled at them. She picked up a broom and walked into the next room. She said she'd seen little children with large heads run and hide. Then it went dark again, and they were gone. She was upset and wanted help dealing with the problem. My mother talked to tribal health relations to help check up on her and provide some help with her well-being. When we returned to check up on her, she told us she was visited again at night. This time she told us that she'd just pulled the covers over her head and laid still. She said that they came into her room and started to dig around. She heard them open her dresser drawer and open her curtains to her closet. She lied motionless, and they eventually left. Not much longer, she fell and broke her hip and is moved to a long-term care facility where she passed away. not sure what happened to her house or her land. I know that she didn't have any children, and her husband had passed away several years before her encounters. So quoth this raven. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.